The stars burned quietly over Helion Prime the day the Empire came. They arrived not in haste nor fear, but in majesty. The crimson banners of the Valcor Dominion unfurled across the void, their warships gliding into orbit like executioners taking position. Below them, the human colony shimmered, a fragile pearl of blue and white nestled against the planet's green continents. It had been humanity's farthest reach into imperial space, a symbol of peace, trade, and coexistence. But peace was a human word. The Valcor had other words for it: submission, tribute, obedience. When the colony governor refused their levy of allegiance, a demand for 1 in every 10 citizens to be conscripted into imperial servitude, the Valcor commander, Admiral Threx, broadcast his reply across every channel. His face, a mask of scaled contempt, filled every screen on Helion Prime. Earth's whelps forget their place. You think your frail species deserves the stars? You will serve, or you will burn. The bombardment began 1 hour later. From orbit, the Valcor fleet painted the skies red. Kinetic lances tore through atmosphere, shattering cities and boiling oceans. The planetary shield, primitive by imperial standards, lasted 11 minutes. When it failed, the colony fell silent. 50,000 souls turned to vapor, and when the smoke cleared, Admiral Threx laughed. Let them see what Defiance costs. He ordered a transmission to Earth, an open channel to the United Terran Assembly. On the screen, he stood before the shattered ruins of Helion Prime's capital, a Terran flag trampled beneath his boots. This is mercy, he sneered. Submit your worlds, and the Dominion will spare you the pain of learning how weak you truly are. Then, with one last flick of arrogance, he ended the broadcast with 3 words that would echo across human history. The Empire commands silence. 2. The laughter of the conquerors for weeks. The Valcor Dominion celebrated their victory. The destruction of Helion Prime was broadcast across the galactic networks as a warning to any who would ally with primitives. In the great halls of Varnakar, the imperial capital, nobles toasted to Earth's humiliation. They hide behind laws, one lord scoffed. They think diplomacy shields them. How quaint. Let them petition their assembly, another laughed. By the time they finish speaking, we'll have taken their moon. Human envoys who had once been invited to imperial courts found themselves mocked, ridiculed, dismissed. Some were even executed in public squares, an offering to the crowd's amusement. The Empire thought it would end there. They thought Earth's silence was submission, that humanity's patience meant fear, that the species who once whispered never again after their own wars had forgotten what it meant to fight. In their arrogance, they mistook stillness for weakness, and in doing so, they signed their own death sentence because Earth was silent, but not out of fear. They were listening, counting, remembering, and building to 3. The silence before the storm. It began with whispers in the dark. Imperial border stations reported ghost signatures, massive, cold contacts drifting through dead space. Long-range buoys vanished without distress signals. Traders spoke of Terran ships appearing in the black, their transponders blank, their hulls silent. The Empire laughed it off. Let them play pirates, Admiral Threx declared. They can't even breach our perimeters. But then, an Imperial outpost on the fringe of Sector 9 vanished. No distress call. No wreckage, just gone. 3 days later, another. When the investigation ships arrived, they found only silence and debris fields stripped clean. The Valcor High Command began to grow uneasy. They ordered tighter patrols, activated border beacons, and increased taxation to fund security measures. But still, the disappearances continued, and then, without warning, every Imperial communications relay near human space went dark. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion's vast empire was blind. It was then that the message came. A single transmission, piggybacked on an ancient frequency once used by early human explorers. 6 words, no more. We heard your command for silence. And then, static. The Empire's laughter finally died at full. The shattering of the heavens, the storm broke, on the 9th of Solaris cycle. In the deep reaches of the Varnakar frontier, Imperial sensors detected the impossible, an armada emerging from folded space, larger than any recorded fleet in human history. At first, the Valcor assumed it was a malfunction. Then came the visuals, human ships, thousands of them. But these were not the fragile freighters and lightly armed cruisers the Empire remembered. These were Leviathans, the Resolute-class dreadnoughts, city-sized war machines forged in the orbital yards of Mars. Their hulls gleamed black as obsidian, built to absorb and reflect radar. And leading them, a single vessel, marked with Earth's old naval emblem, the blue and silver crest of the Terran Defense Command, the UNS Vengeance Eternal. Her captain, Fleet Marshal Elena Rao, transmitted a single message to every Imperial listening post. Helion Prime sends its regards. Then the fleet opened fire. The first wave erased the Imperial frontier. Planetary defense grids, shipyards, and orbital rings were reduced to molten glass within minutes. The Valkor fleet scrambled to respond, but their coordination faltered. Their comms were jammed, their tactics obsolete against human AI coordination networks. When the humans came, they came not as soldiers, but as executioners. The Vengeance Eternal led bombardments with kinetic rods the size of skyscrapers, launched from low orbit at 10 kilometers per second. Each impact cracked worlds open like eggs. Troop carriers followed, deploying silent drop pods that fell like meteors. The ground shook under the march of the iron phalanx, Terran infantry in exosuits of black titanium, moving without mercy. Cities fell, garrisons burned. Every world that had celebrated Helion's fall was now a tomb. The Empire's desperation at first, the Imperial High Command refused to believe the scope of the assault. They dismissed reports as exaggeration. They insisted humanity couldn't possibly field such a fleet, let alone sustain one. But as world after world went dark, panic spread like wildfire. The Emperor convened an emergency council. Holograms flickered in the great throne chamber as admirals shouted over one another. They've breached the outer rim. We've lost contact with the Zephon Bastion. They're not taking prisoners. By the stars, they're erasing us. And then, through the chaos, a new message appeared, projected across the chamber. It wasn't from a spy or a diplomat. It was a live feed. A human stood before the Imperial throne itself, Admiral Threx's own command room. Breached, burning, behind her. Fleet Marshal Elena Rao looked straight into the eyes of the Emperor and said, with cold surgical precision, "You mocked Earth's defiance. You called us fragile. But we are the children of a dying world. We learned long ago that survival is earned through fire. You wanted silence. Instead, you will hear our roar." Then she cut the feed. Hours later, the Imperial capital came under siege. Chug's firefall. The Battle of Varnacar lasted 72 minutes. 72 minutes for an empire that had ruled for 12,000 years. The Terran fleet entered the system under full stealth, dropping from folded space at point-blank range. Their opening salvo obliterated the orbital defenses before they could raise shields. Planetary interceptors launched in desperation, but Earth's railguns turned them into slag mid-flight. Then came the bombardment. Each strike was measured, calculated, surgical destruction. The Imperial Palace, the Command Citadel, the Senate Spire. Every symbol of power turned to ash under white plasma fire. As Varnacar's atmosphere burned, millions watched from across the stars. The feeds broadcast the unthinkable. The Dominion's capital in flames, the Emperor's fleet shattered, his flagship, a monument of gold and arrogance, split clean in two by a single human dreadnought salvo. And through it all, the Vengeance Eternal remained in orbit, silent, watching. When the fires finally dimmed, Fleet Marshal Rao transmitted one final message to the surviving systems. It was brief, almost quiet. Earth remembers. And then the fleet turned away, leaving the Dominion to burn in its own reflection. 7th. The ashes of Empire months passed. The once mighty Dominion was now a graveyard of smoldering worlds and shattered fleets. The lesser races, once enslaved or subjugated, rose in rebellion, emboldened by humanity's wrath. The name Earth became a whisper, not of pity or weakness, but of terror. Merchants would lower their voices when speaking of it. Admirals would double their patrols near human borders. Children on distant worlds whispered ghost stories about the silent ones from Sol, who could strike from nowhere and vanish without trace. Among the ruins of the Valkor throne, historians would one day find the Emperor's final log. The last entry was barely coherent, part confession, part realization. They are not conquerors. They are avengers. We mistook restraint for cowardice. They could have claimed the stars long ago. Instead, they waited. And when we pushed them, they broke the heavens. The 8th. The weight of vengeance Earth never claimed the Dominion's worlds. No banners were raised, no governors appointed. Humanity simply erased the threat, then withdrew to its borders. The galaxy expected them to continue the conquest, to seize what remained of the Imperial systems. But the humans did not. They left the ashes to speak for them. In the years that followed, When emissaries from surviving nations came to the Sol system to offer tribute or apology, they found Earth quiet once more. Its fleets docked, its skies calm. No parades, no boasts, only silence. But that silence carried the weight of 1,000,000 screams and a single, unspoken promise. Never again, because humanity's patience was vast, but their vengeance, infinite. And somewhere, in the deep vaults of Luna Command, the Vengeance Eternal rested in orbit, its hull scorched black from the fires of war. On its bow, engraved in steel older than the Dominion itself, were the words that had become legend across the stars. The Empire mocked Earth's defiance and fell in flames, and so the galaxy learned an ancient truth. The quiet ones are not weak, they are waiting.